Well, now that you've raised the point, Mike, I think it would be appropriate to ask, what is philosophy exactly?
Philosophy, Dave, is the intellectual discipline whose purpose is to study the fundamental nature of things, which then enables the special sciences to study isolated aspects of the universe. Or, one could say that the purpose of philosophy is to teach man to make valid identifications, i.e., establish the identity of the fundamental nature of things. And one may learn to do this only once he has come to understand the 5 branches of philosophy, Dave. Forming the base of philosophy's hierarchical knowledge are metaphysics, which studies the fundamental nature of reality and man, and epistemology, which studies the nature of knowledge and man's means of acquiring it. Logically based on and derived from these 2 fundamental branches is the 3rd branch, ethics. It is only on the basis of having properly identified the fundamental nature of man, including his means of knowledge, and of the universe in which he acts, that it is possible to formulate a prescription for what man ought to do. Whereas the first 2 branches are essentially descriptive, ethics is prescriptive. The task of a proper, non-religious, scientific ethics is to teach man, quite simply, to make the right choices. The next step up man's hierarchical structure of knowledge is politics. Its proper function is to identify and implement the principles that serve as a logical transition from guiding a man's actions to guiding his actions with others, and to tie it all together and present man his abstract theoretical philosophy in concretized form for his pleasure and contemplation is aesthetics or art. Everyone listening to this tape has a metaphysics, a view of reality, an epistemology, a view of knowledge, an ethics, a code for making choices, a politics, and an aesthetics, or art values. In short, he has a philosophy. Man needs a philosophy in order to live. The only alternative, Dave, is whether the individual gains his philosophy by chance or by choice. That's all I want to say about the 5 branches, except that if anyone listening does care, if you don't want to leave the creation of your soul to chance, literally, and that is the issue, then start studying philosophy by reading Ayn Rand's novel The Fountainhead, and concurrent with reading The Fountainhead, I'd strongly suggest you read her book of explicit philosophical essays entitled Philosophy. Who Needs It?
That sounds almost frightening, leaving the creation of one's own soul to chance.
Well, it shouldn't frighten anyone, although it should have a sobering effect. Most in our culture have, in fact, left the issue of their own souls to chance influences. One's soul, Dave, is not some gossamer-like, ghostly ethereum lodged in his nervous system. Your soul is your consciousness, which is comprised of 2 elements, your ideas and your emotions, which are integrated. Your emotions are literally the products of your ideas, your thinking. And most people blindly and uncritically accept their ideas from magazines, books, movies, family, friends, teachers, by osmosis from the cultural atmosphere, as Ayn Rand put it. As a result, many of their ideas or beliefs are contradictory, which is why they are torn by conflict and thus uncertain about so many things. Without philosophy, one cannot critically evaluate ideas, and he perforce becomes a man of mixed premises, with a soul like a shapeless piece of clay, stamped by footprints going in all directions. With a proper understanding of the power of ideas, that is philosophy, one can achieve an integrated personality, as I described on tape 1, where there are no contradictions between a man's thought, feelings, and actions.
Well put, Mike. You know, one of my favorite articles of yours in All Natural Muscular Development had as its theme the issue of concrete-bound bodybuilders versus principled bodybuilders. Now, what in hell does concrete-bound mean?
That's one of my favorite topics as well, Dave. Let me explain how I came to write that piece. I receive phone calls and letters regularly from bodybuilders who are being harassed by others in their gym merely because they are training in a radically different fashion, namely with brief and infrequent high-intensity workouts. They are usually called crazy, and some have even been threatened with physical violence, literally. Dave, there are essentially 2 types of people in the world: those for whom the mind and knowledge matter enormously, who volitionally choose to work conscientiously and achieve cognitive precision and wide-scale factual integration. Then there are the others, the mentally passive, who decided that the effort required to gain a philosophic, scientific, that is, principled understanding of reality, including their own inner life, wasn't worth the effort. And the mentally passive are the ones who have a penchant for calling my clients crazy or even threatening them with violence. Philosophically, these are referred to as concrete-bound mentalities. They are limited to dealing with the first level of abstraction, that is, concepts that refer to directly perceivable or concrete objects such as chair, table, gym, weights, biceps, etc. When confronted with higher-level abstractions, those not referring to what is directly perceived, such as the concept's theory or principle, they shrink away bewildered. You see, Dave, gaining a thorough, first-hand understanding of higher concepts requires extensive mental effort, of the sort that these individuals have spent most of their lives actively evading. Hence, upon encountering that better type of individual, the one who heartily embraced the effort and responsibility of rational thought and critical judgment, the self-arrested, concrete-bound person feels threatened even to the point where he'll use violence. These are the ones who leave the creation of their souls to chance, as I was discussing previously. Which brings to mind one of my favorite statements from all of literature, and it is from Victor Hugo in his novel Les Miserables. Listen carefully, Dave, and I quote, "They were of those dwarfish natures, which if perchance heated by some sullen fire, easily become monstrous. There are souls, which crab-like, crawl continually towards darkness, going back in life rather than advancing in it, using what experience they have to increase their deformity, growing worse without ceasing, and becoming steeped more and more thoroughly in an intensifying wickedness." Close quote. The point here is that either one continues to gain knowledge and progress morally, or he does not, and goes backward. There is no such thing, Dave, as standing still in human life, or stagnating. Either you move forward or backward.
Yes, I'm sure we have all heard something to that effect earlier in our life.
Yes, and it is an important concept for bodybuilders who desire to mature properly to consider. While the degree one can train to stimulate the growth of larger muscles, of course, is strictly limited, there is no limit to how much knowledge one can integrate, as human knowledge is an open-ended hierarchy. A philosophically motivated individual has the capacity to gain knowledge, to develop intellectually from his first moment of cognizant awareness to his last dying breath.
Mike, just to switch gears here for a moment, I understand that one of your recent articles in Muscular Development angered a number of people. I believe it was your report on the Night of the Champions contest.
Yes, it did, Dave. It did anger some people. So far, 3 different individuals have contacted me in protest of what I said about them in that article. One of those 3 threatened me physically, a severely self-arrested, concrete-bound individual. As I was leaving Gold's Gym after my own workout, this particular person confronted me, screaming maniacally. Then he started pushing me, saying that I attacked him personally in that article, and that he wanted to go outside and beat me up. I told him that if he touched me one more time, I'd make sure he would spend some time in jail, and that it was a free country, so I could write anything I chose short of libel. By then, the employees from behind the front desk were there to pull him off me, at which point he was still railing on and on, something to the effect that I was a horrible writer anyway, and that he'd get me back somehow. In fact, I said nothing about his moral worth or person in that article, Dave. I merely reported that he wasn't in his best condition for this contest or his last one. Imagine how such an individual might act in a real crisis situation when he has so little self-control in one where there is no real threat. He is in dire need of the type of mind training that a philosophy of reason provides. The day after that incident, I was again leaving the gym when Flex Wheeler piped up, "So, you think I don't know how to train, huh?" Amongst the many glowing things I had written about Flex's physique in that article, I also wrote that neither he nor Ron Coleman had the slightest clue as how to properly direct their training effort. I walked over to Flex and said, "No, Flex, you really don't know how to train. If I could train you for 6 months, you'd beat Dorian Yates. And that was that, Dave, a more civilized encounter, if you will.
Now, Mike, we don't have much time remaining, and I wanted to ask you some questions I have about heavy duty. For instance, why do you have your clients train so infrequently on a split routine? Isn't it true that if one trains different body parts each workout, he can train more frequently, since the non-worked body part is afforded rest on the day he is working other body parts?
This is a very common belief, but it simply is not true. You are failing to recognize, Dave, that exercise, in addition to having a localized effect on the given muscle being worked, also has a systemic effect. That is, it affects the rest of the physical system. Localized muscle recovery actually is completed fairly quickly, with systemic recovery taking up to 4 days or longer in some cases. Haven't you had a heavy leg workout, say on a Friday, Dave, then intentionally rested all weekend thinking you'd be fully recovered? But instead, you woke up on Monday still generally fatigued? See what I mean?
Yes, indeed, and I have had that experience, and you're right. Now, I see the distinction now very clearly between localized recovery and systemic recovery. Now, my next question has to do with your new ad for Heavy Duty 2 in All Natural Muscular Development, wherein you claim it is possible for an individual to actualize his muscular potential in 1 year. That doesn't seem possible.
Those who know nothing about the scientific principles of high-intensity, anaerobic exercise stress physiology not only would think that actualizing one's muscular potential in a year would be impossible, they actually wouldn't know where to begin in projecting how long the actualization of their muscular potential might take. Those utilizing the blind, non-theoretical volume approach to training are continuously fretting as to whether they'll ever achieve their goal of bigger muscles or not, because they know nothing, literally nothing about the nature of the training stress required to stimulate growth, or that the volume and frequency of weight training exercise must be cautiously regulated. I made the point on one of the other tapes, Dave, that when in possession of a truly valid theory, and beyond that, and just as important, one is making the proper, practical application of the theoretical principles, progress, no matter what the field of endeavor, should be nothing short of spectacular all the time. Remember, the purpose of theoretical knowledge is to serve as a guide for successful human action.
Mike, I don't ever recall seeing you address the issue of steroid use as it relates to heavy-duty training in any of your articles. With the trend away from steroids, I would think that there would be a stampede toward high-intensity training.
Dave, this is one of the most pressing issues in modern bodybuilding, the move away from steroids and their resultant effect on training. But your posing of the question implies a consideration perhaps not generally understood. The reason some bodybuilders have gained muscle with volume training relates to the fact that steroids act primarily as recovery ability enhancers. Were those same bodybuilders to train for 2 hours a day, 6 days a week without steroids, they would begin to lose muscle mass almost immediately. Heavy-duty, high-intensity training is tailor-made for the non-steroid natural bodybuilder because of the painstaking precaution to properly regulate the volume and frequency of exercise to prevent overtraining. I'd like to warn the neophyte bodybuilder that those outlandish routines you read about in certain muscle magazines, which advocate that you train like the top champs for hours every day, were developed with the explicit understanding that steroid use increases recovery ability or exercise stress tolerance manyfold, yet continue to be promulgated by unscrupulous publishers who refuse to inform their readers, the majority of whom are natural, non-steroid bodybuilders, that the top champs who employ them are drug users. And with steroid use becoming a thing of the past, Steve Bleckman, All Natural Muscular Development magazine, and Twin Lab have picked up the gauntlet by investing in research and product development, which leads the way in providing nutritional supplements that serve as the proper, healthy way to augment muscular development. Those insane marathon workouts do not, cannot, will not yield any results for those with a normal complement of hormones. They don't even work, for Christ's sakes. For many who do take steroids, as innumerable of my phone clients have reported, only those with superior genetics who take steroids make progress while training with the marathon or volume approach, and even they would make much greater progress, of course, if they trained properly. The proof of that is my own success with heavy duty, Casey Viators, Aaron Bakers, David Durst, David Pauls, not to mention Dorian Yates, and my hundreds of clients.
What about women, Mike? Does high intensity work for them as well as men?
Yes, because the principles of human physiology, Dave, are just that. The principles of human physiology. They are applicable to all, male, female, black, white, tall, short, young, and old, with some variations, of course. And the primary difference between male-female physiology is the sexual reproductive system. Within the context of lesser testosterone endowment, therefore, it can be inferred that women don't tolerate exercise stress as well as men, though not always. I have worked with naturally mesomorphic women who gain better than some men. My advice to women is to follow the advice in these tapes and the accompanying booklet and start with the baseline workout, whether the goal is to become a bodybuilder, a fitness competitor or model, or even just develop optimum fitness for personal reasons.
And what about older people?
In fact, high-intensity training is very good for older people, as without some form of weight-bearing stress, older women in particular become prone to osteoporosis, which is demineralizing of the bones. Older people, men and women, also tend to lose lean mass unless they engage in some form of weight training and aerobic exercise. And as you know, the loss of lean mass results in the slowing of the metabolism, which makes it easier to get fat.
I would imagine many like your heavy-duty workouts because they are brief and infrequent.
I have spoken with numerous people, especially intelligent, career-oriented individuals who were either about to give up weight training or were reluctant to start as they were under the impression that training every day for an hour or two was required, and they just couldn't justify, Dave, that kind of time expenditure. Then they read about my approach and only trained for 20 minutes every 4 or 5 days, and now these same people are quite delighted with their progress. What never ceases to amaze me, Dave, is the number of bodybuilders who scoff at the mere suggestion of even trying heavy duty and continue to slave away for hours a day with little in the way of meaningful progress. Throughout human history, men have done all they could to avoid slavery, and here in the latter part of the 20th century, there's a group of knuckleheads who seem to willfully embrace the role of beast of burden.
What about aerobic exercise and cardiorespiratory health?
Dave, aerobics have been inordinately emphasized over the last decade, ever since it was recognized that the public is more likely to engage in low-intensity aerobic activity than in high-intensity anaerobic activity. Some may recall that prior to the heavy emphasis on aerobic conditioning, the primary emphasis was on something called total fitness. Total fitness is comprised of several components, including skeletal muscle strength, flexibility, endurance, the building and maintenance of lean mass, and positive self-image, all of which are best achieved through a properly conducted weight training program. Aerobic activity does next to nothing to provide for increased skeletal muscle strength. In fact, by overworking certain few muscles to the exclusion of working others at all, aerobics can create imbalances in the skeletal muscular system, which increases the likelihood of injuries. Nor does aerobic exercise improve flexibility, anaerobic endurance, or lean mass. And it was never cast in stone that one must limit his activity to repetitive movement of the legs as on a treadmill or stairmaster to improve his cardiorespiratory endurance. The cardinal principle for improving cardiorespiratory fitness is that the individual sustain a certain age-related pulse rate for at least 12 to 20 minutes. This can be easily accomplished with high-intensity training by limiting rest time between sets. Or, if a person is hell-bent on doing aerobics, remember, it is possible to overtrain here too. When training in high-intensity fashion, as described on tape 2, limit aerobics to no more than 20 to 30 minutes twice a week. And for the bodybuilder who is seeking to develop maximum muscle mass in the shortest time possible, I strongly advise he eliminate aerobics entirely for a while. This is because the body has a strictly limited adaptive capacity. It's not as if the body has 100 units of adaptive resources for increases in strength of size and 100 units available for adapting with increased endurance. The body possesses but 100 units of adaptive energy, period. Or in other words, training guided by mixed premises will not yield results of the same magnitude as would adaptive specific training.
Mike, I see that our time is up. Thank you very much for a most enlightening interview, and I will look forward to talking to you again soon.
Dave, it was my pleasure.
The editors of All Natural Muscular Development are pleased to have been able to bring you these highly informative lectures by Mike Mentzer, who writes exclusively for their magazine. Pick up a copy today, or better yet, order your subscription to All Natural Muscular Development at 40% off the newsstand price